So in this part, we're going to look at Aikido weapons and a short introduction to how they work or what different weapons there are with the traditions of them. So this is our weapon rack. If you're going to look at it, there's a bunch of different weapons. Some of them are traditional and per se professional. Some of them are just improvisation, so don't consider all of them to be the weapons that they're supposed to be. But to begin with, we're going to start looking at the bokken. So this is the bokken. Since our dojo is connected to the traditional technical roots of Iwamaru, so this bokken is actually oftentimes called Iwama bokken. It's blunt and it's quite heavy, which you could use it as a weapon. So one thing which is important, which I actually didn't do right now, is that when you take the weapon, is that you actually take it in both hands, have it in front of you, and bow to the weapon. As far as I experienced, the bows normally goes to the shomen, the side of the shomen. So that's a good way to feel that, okay, this is not just a stick, this is a weapon that you're going to train with. It's actually fairly dangerous, and you have to be conscious about it, you have to respect it, protect it. So the bow is a good tradition and it's important. The bokken itself, bo means wood, ken sword, so bokken is a wooden sword. As I said, this is the Iwama style bokken. If we will look at another bokken, this is a different bokken. This is, in my understanding, this is more kata bokken. It's lighter, it's not as endurable. It has a pointy edge, but there are different variations of different swords for different schools. It's not really my specialty, so I can't say too much about it, but you can notice that the differences are there, and they might be used for different reasons. So again, as you want to put it back, also you bow, and you put it at. Also, what I noticed, that as far as I know, that in dojos, when you place it, it's important also where the tip of the bokken of the weapon looks. So our shomen is behind the camera, the other side. So the tip shouldn't be facing towards the shomen. So if the shomen is there, the tip is going to be there. I bow and place it back. Now they say a few more thoughts about the traditions. In one of the kendo seminars I went, it was explained to me that a bokken, also during training I noticed that most of the teachers, most of the dojos hold the bokken on the left side. But as far as I understood from the kendo seminar, that if the bokken is on the left, that means you're ready for combat, because the hand movement, you can go straight into a kamae, a stance. On the right side, as far as I learned, it's considered to be a more peaceful way. So if you're holding it on the right, it's a peaceful position because it's harder to take it, harder to attack with it. So you can notice that, but I don't believe it's so important, at least in most of the dojos. But let's say the more traditional way, on the left side. Now when you look at bokken, when you're going to train with it, it's important to notice that the bokken is used in different ways. So one of them, the bokken can be used as a substitute for a sword. So all your movements are going to be cutting movements. A sword obviously cuts. So when you cut, you're going to do a slicing movement. But also, the bokken can be used as a bokken, as a wooden sword, which hits, which causes damage like that. That's actually the way we train in our dojo, so you're going to need to strike. So it's important to know from the very beginning how you're going to use the bokken, what type of weapon it is for you, whether it's a substitute for a sword and train with a live blade, or you're as a wooden sword. We can train both, but some dojos will do it one way or the other. It's not right or wrong, it's just different. So when you come to a new dojo, notice how they do it, try to do it the way they do it, and when you train in your dojo, also be conscious about that question. So when we actually talk about whether using the bokken as a live blade, a bokken itself, so if it's going to be a substitute for a live blade, then it makes sense to train pulling it out and standing into kamae, or doing the pulling out movement here, as if you're taking it from a saya, from a sheath. But if you're using it just as a bokken, as a hitting weapon, also it makes sense to simply take it out, because there's no saya, there's no sheath for it, there's no need for that. So be conscious about those differences as you train. Also, there's some moments, we'll talk in other parts, as how to give it to another person, not to point it in front, but actually to give it sideways. Again, some dojos will be more picky about that, some not, but most of the dojos, what they consider to be important is that you should, despite that this is a bokken, a wooden sword, you should mind that this is technically a live blade, technically a live edge, a sharp edge. So it's a good habit not to develop a habit to grab here, but rather to be conscious about where you're grabbing it, how you're grabbing it, to be conscious where the hilt is, and not to develop habits which would be dangerous later for a live blade, to stay conscious. Also, when you're holding it, when you're watching the sensei talk, you can hold it on the side. There is this a desire to just place the bokken, lean yourself on it, and some dojos will allow that. I personally don't mind that. But some dojos will consider this to be a very bad etiquette because this is a sword, this is sacred, so placing it on the ground shouldn't be done. You shouldn't be lying on it as on a stick. It's a weapon. So if your dojo allows it, does it. But if you travel to another dojo, be conscious about that before doing that. Also, the last moment for the sword, in my travels, in my experience of Aikido, I've discovered two different ways of working with the bokken, with the Aikiken, with the Aikido sword. Many dojos are working with a sword where the sword cuts and then the body comes in. So the sword cuts and then the body comes in, which is a more, in my experience, it's a more traditional way of working with the sword. More traditional schools work with it. It makes sense that if there's a danger in front, you first reach out and then you step in. Another way to train that, to train with bokken, is actually where the body steps in first. The body steps in and then use the ground, then you use the hips to strike. So these are quite different methods, and we're training ourselves in the second method where the body steps in first, so the body steps out of the attack line, and then there's a movement where the logic behind that is that in Aikido techniques also the body is first and then the arms, so you're developing that. I mean, you're learning to use the hips. So there's a logic in both different methods, but also notice whether it's one or the other. And when you go to another dojo, don't try to enforce your way, but understand that there's a different logic behind those two. Now, the second most common weapon in Aikido is the jo, or a combat staff. It's shorter than a bow, so a bow is a long staff, and it's longer than many other staffs. Normally, what its specialty is that you can grab with both hands. If it's a bow, you can't extend out, and it's too far, but the jo should be actually about, without overextending, about the size of your hand, full length of the hands, of the arms. So here I'm missing a bit of a part. It's an interesting coincidence that normally that's approximately how long the distance is going to be to your armpits. That's how much I'm missing here. That's how much I'm missing here. So approximately. So when you're wanting to buy a jo, when you're looking out if the size is right for you, you can either place it next to the armpit and see if there is a distance missing. That means you need a longer one, or if it's too long, or you can do it this way. So the jo, again, we could talk a lot about that, but what we spoke about the bokken, similar principles apply, either jo first and then body first or jo. The principles of holding it, the etiquette, it's very similar, so it can translate from the bokken to here. Obviously there's no blade to mind, it's a turnable weapon, but we're gonna explore it more and look at it in its own particular part. And the last common weapon in Aikido, I'm going to just shortly introduce, it's a tanto. It's a Japanese knife, or a knife in Japanese. Similar rules apply to what we spoke about, but again, we're going to we have another part specifically devoted to tanto, and we're going to look at tantos more there.